Hello everyone. Hi. Hi. Hopefully you can hear me. Ooh, yeah, perfect. Cool. Okay. Hi. Welcome to lesson 7 of this 8-week series on AI for beginners. So today we're looking at something quite different from previous lessons. So the last 2 weeks we were looking at AI for robots. This week we're looking at AI for deepfakes. So you may or may not have heard of this before. I'm interested to know if you have. You may have maybe seen it on social media. Sometimes this sort of stuff goes viral. We're going to talk in a minute about exactly what synthetic media slash deepfakes are. They're sort of the same, well, different words for the same thing. I have just here on the screen some pictures of different deepfakes that you may recognize or you may have seen before. So there's some really cool ones of Pope Francis. For anyone who doesn't know what a deepfake is, it's essentially just a fake image. So it looks like a real one, normally of a famous person, but it's not actually real. It's been generated with AI. So we're going to talk all about that in a second. But yeah, I just put some up on the screen here for you guys to see and have a look at in case you haven't seen any of these before. So we have some deepfakes of famous actors like Tom Cruise. And also deepfakes are used in TikTok filters. So they're used a bit everywhere. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the potential harms of this technology, as well as some potential benefits that people often don't think about. And also, of course, we're going to talk about how it works and the AI behind that. Right, so let's get started just by talking a little bit about what it actually is, right? So what is a deepfake? How do we define a deepfake? So basically, a deepfake is just an image or recording that has been convincingly altered and manipulated to misrepresent someone as doing or saying something that they didn't. So I like this definition. I got it from Merriam-Webster. I like it because it says image or recording. And I think that's important because sometimes people think that deepfakes are only videos or only pictures that have been changed. But also you could have like a deepfake audio recording. So you could have a politician deepfake of something that they haven't actually said. So that's important to remember. This definition does have quite a negative take on it, and I think that's because often deepfakes can be used in a very negative way. We're going to talk a little bit about the positive ways that they can be used as well. But yeah, so that's sort of a definition just for anyone who really hasn't heard of it before. So now let's get started and talk a little bit about how this technology works. So there's a lot of similarities in how this works in things we've talked about in previous lessons. So we've talked about AI art and how that works by essentially being exposing the AI to thousands and thousands of pictures. And we talked a little bit about learning and how that works. And it's very similar in deepfakes using a type of AI called a neural network. But essentially, yeah, it's the same idea, right? So you feed an AI with thousands and thousands of images of the person that you're trying to recreate. And bit by bit, it learns, the unique features that make up that person's face. And then with all of that input is then able to generate some new videos or images of that person's features in a way that looks really realistic. And then can make that person say or do something that they haven't actually done. So another important thing to note that sometimes people don't realize is that it's quite different from something like face swapping. So it's not simply sort of overlaying someone's face on someone else's. It's much more subtle than that. It's more like a facial manipulation. So it's more of a it learns that person's features and then it overlays them onto someone else. Also taking into account that person's features in a way that makes it look very realistic. And there's a good example here on the bottom picture, right? You can see that this is Putin and some man that has overlaid his face onto Putin. You can see that it hasn't sort of just put the man's face onto Putin. It really has sort of done a blend that makes it look really realistic and seamless. So that's important to keep in mind with deepfakes and how they work. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how deepfakes work. So I wanted to talk a bit about some applications that people don't always realize are deepfakes. So briefly, let's talk about filters. So filters is an example of the way that deepfakes are used nowadays. So if anyone has social media, you may have seen a lot of social medias like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, they have a lot of filters. So the vast majority of filters don't use deepfakes and don't use AI, and they sort of just overlay an effect onto you. So those may be the ones that you're familiar with. But increasingly, they're getting more advanced and they're using AI in their filters. They're sort of using deepfakes in their filters. And this sort of stuff has caused a lot of controversy and has gone quite viral because the result of this is that the filters look incredibly realistic. They look incredibly seamless. And unlike before, where maybe the filters didn't really didn't make you look like yourself, it was more like another person, and it was very clear that it was a filter. And these are becoming increasingly hard to tell that it's a filter. And so here there's this example of this filter that went very viral and became very controversial, made by TikTok, called Bald Glamour, which uses AI and uses deepfake technology. And essentially, before it overlays the filter onto your face, it examines your face, it finds your features, and then overlays this filter onto you in a really seamless manner. And it can be very difficult to tell that people are even wearing a filter. So yeah, this has caused a lot of buzz in terms of whether this is good. I mean, filters are already something that some people don't like. So this is sort of a new level of making it even more realistic. And we'll talk about a lot of these problems that come along with deepfakes in just a minute. And yeah, so I briefly mentioned that deepfakes are not just about images and that you can have voice deepfakes. So these are becoming increasingly popular and increasingly uncanny and realistic as well. So a very big software company that develops these sort of voice deepfakes is called 11 Labs. And actually, I think this is open to everyone, but I do think it's a paid software. But essentially what you can do is you can generate a deepfake of your own voice. So kind of like what we talked about with image deepfakes, where you just show the AI a bunch of images of that person. It's the same with voice deepfakes, where you just input a bunch of recordings of your own voice, and then it can generate you saying another phrase that you haven't said before. So yeah, this is the sort of technology that exists now. It's interesting to see it in practice. So I wanted to show you guys a small video that was made by CNN. So the video I'm going to show you, it's a CNN reporter who was trying to convince his parents that essentially it's him talking and not an AI. So he just gets on a call, he calls his mum, he calls his dad, and he gets this AI that has been trained on his voice, this deepfake voice of himself, to speak to them. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if his parents fall for this mini prank or not. So let's have a look at this video.
Voice.
Yeah.
Think I'm going to be successful?
I'm nervous. I'm like, my hands are.
All right.
Hello?
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Donnie. How are you?
Just finished shooting our story here. I'm going to the airport in a while.
All right. There seems to be a delay in the phone, Donnie.
Can I say a quick hello to Dad?
Yeah.
How you doing here?
Hi, Dad.
How are you here?
How are you?
Good yourself?
Just finished shooting our story here. I'm going to the airport in a while.
How are you? Oh, you're going back again earlier?
Are Kerry playing this weekend?
They're playing Caterina Sunday.
My dad went on to have a conversation with the AI Donny about how Kerry, our home football team, had a game that weekend. Eventually, I had to come clean.
Dad, I'll give you a call better later on. Could you just put me back on to Mom for a second?
My parents knew something was off, but ultimately they still fell for it.
Oh, yeah. Some of it don't do that, but it was like your voice was a little tone lower and it sounded very serious.
Yeah.
Like you had something serious to say. Because I went, oh, geez, my heart was hopping first.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, the voice is very funny. The voice is very funny, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you got a bit of an overview of how that sort of technology works and what it can offer. So as you saw in the video, his parents did fall for it, but definitely it's not a very, very natural sounding voice. As they said, that it sounded quite serious. Sometimes it can sound a bit in a monotone. It could be very difficult for AI to get the tonality right, sort of where to place emphasis in the phrase. You can try this out for yourself. So if you go on this website 11 Labs, I think you have to pay to sort of do it with your own voice, but you can try out sort of their synthetic voices, and I think it's quite cool to try it out and see for yourself and see how natural sounding you think it is. I mean, there's definitely a lot of progress that needs to be made in this technology. But as we'll talk about, it has fooled quite a lot of people, and this can cause damage, right? So the example I showed you guys of the CNN reporter, of course, that's sort of like a harmless prank. He told his parents at the end, it's just some fun. But there's a lot of harmful potential that I'm sure you guys can see in this kind of technology, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So let's start by talking about voice, since we were just talking about that now. Yeah, we saw a very harmless example, but it's clear that this could be used in a bad way, and this has already happened. So a fraudster, in fact, used deepfake voice technology as part of a $35 million heist. So the way this fraudster got away with this is he cloned a company director's voice, and then he called, I'm not sure if it was his assistant or someone in the company, using this director's voice, claiming that he needed a large amount of money to be sent to him for investors. And of course, this person, hearing their boss's voice, just sent the money and didn't sort of question it or think that it would be a deepfake. And I think that's what's important to realize with this sort of technology, right? Is maybe we hear it and we think, oh, that doesn't sound very natural, but that's because you already know that you're watching a video on deepfakes, right? But if you're talking to your boss or you're talking to your friend, you wouldn't suspect it of being a deepfake. And that's what's important with this as well, is it does often involve a lot of social engineering, and that's sometimes the way that a lot of these scammers get away with things, is a sense of urgency, or building this sense of trust that even when there's small issues with the technology, they still manage to convince people. And so this can be a huge issue. So that's one way in which this can be a huge issue. And another big example that happened was actually in politics. So someone made a deepfake of the mayor of Kiev and managed to enter a Zoom meeting with other European politicians. And for about 15 minutes, he managed to get away with this sort of deepfake voice and deepfake face, and no one realized. So again, right, it's clear that this stuff can fool people. And the last image I have, this is a fake image of Trump's arrest. And this is arguably the biggest issue with deepfakes, is that it can easily spread misinformation and disinformation, which is already a big issue. But with deepfakes, this issue can just be completely exacerbated by creating images that never happened, voices of politicians saying something they never did. So again, it's clear that there's very big issues with these technologies that need to be solved. So we've talked about some of the harmful potential of deepfake. So let's talk a bit about how we can spot a deepfake, because that's really important, right? If we can spot that something's a deepfake, then we have to worry less about being fooled by this sort of stuff. So what are some key giveaways that something is a deepfake? Okay. So it depends on the quality of the deepfake, and it depends on whether we're talking about a video or, a voice or a picture. But let's talk about some general ones. So when we're talking about video, often there's bad lip syncing, and we're going to watch some videos later and you guys can have a look for yourself. But yeah, often the lips aren't synced well with the audio. Another one is just bad jewelry and teeth. Sometimes AI struggles with that, or inconsistent lighting. Actually, in these images, you can sort of see that. So especially on the Obama image, on the artificial one, again, we're being quite harsh here, right? But if we look at the artificial one, the lighting maybe is a little bit unnatural. Another really key giveaway with videos is the subject's blinking looks really unnatural. So they blink too little or they blink too much. Eyebrows also is one that gives it away sometimes. Another one is hair. I think you can kind of see it with the Jennifer Lawrence one. So with the artificial one, the hair kind of looks too fluffy, looks a bit unnatural. And last one of all, which often is the biggest giveaway, even with really good high quality deepfakes, is the skin. So sometimes the skin just looks too airbrush, or the wrinkles don't look natural. It just looks plasticky or marbly. And I think you can see that in both these images, is that the skin just looks a bit off. Again, it's a bit harder to tell when it's just a still image, but when you're watching a video of a deepfake, you can often tell that the skin, something just doesn't look completely human-like with the skin. So that's something to look out for. Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about some of the negative aspects of deepfakes and the harm that they can cause. So let's talk now about the positive use cases of deepfakes, because they do exist, even if maybe they get a bit less attention. So the first one is just aiding people with speech impairments. And I think this one maybe is not your first thought when you think of deepfakes, but when we think about, all the voice generation that they can do, it becomes quite clear that, you know, this could help people that have issues talking, or, you know, speech impediments, to talk in a natural sounding way, using AI, right? So sort of being able to generate their own voice and speak in their natural sounding voice without having to strain their voice. So that's one way that it can be used in a positive way. Another one is just educational purposes. So this is quite general, but there are, you know, boundless ways that this can be used in an educational way. So on the bottom left here, it's a bit small, but I have a bigger image on the next slide. That's a picture from the Dali Museum in the US. So essentially what the Dali Museum did, so Dali is an artist, they essentially made a deepfake version of Dali. So this is sort of an educational way to interact with people, you know, make it more interesting. And it's clear that you can do this with lots of other applications. You can make deepfakes of historical figures like Henry VIII. I think that might have already been done, to just make it more engaging and make it more realistic, make people more interested, especially maybe young people. Another one, of course, is special effects in movies, and you've probably seen this before, so deepfakes in movies. A very famous one is The Irishman. So in The Irishman, they used deepfake technology to make all the actors look younger. So there were sort of two parts of the film, I believe. I haven't actually watched it, but I know that there's a part which was filmed, there's sort of like a 30-year gap. So they needed to make the actors look younger. And so they used deepfake technology to do this. And it was a very long process of going through making the actors look much, much younger than they were. And we're going to watch a clip from that because it's really interesting, and it takes you through all the technology. Well, not all of it because it's quite a long video. We're only going to watch a small clip, but it takes you through some of the technology that they use to generate these deepfakes to essentially make all the actors look younger and keep it quite natural. So let's have a look at that clip.
My name is Douglas Moore. I'm a layout supervisor here at ILM. One of the very first things as part of this process was using our technology called Medusa. We did a Medusa capture of Robert De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci. And what that is had them sitting in a chair, and they'd go through a series of expressions that we call the fax expressions. And from that, we would generate a series of models that can move then from one expression to another. What the software then would do would solve the way the animation, those shapes would blend together on a particular frame.
Software is called Flux. The F stands for facial, and Lux is for the lighting component of it. With Flux, what we were trying to do is we were trying to capture the facial performance of the actors. We would take the images that were shot on set, and we would use our tool to analyze the performance in order to create a 3D model of what was shot on set.
Flux, it's able to see how this face is shaded and how the lighting is hitting it and capture the subtle nuances, a little twitch here, a little wrinkle up in the nose, actually generate a lot of detail directly from the plate.
Whenever our faces are moving or emoting or stuff, there's a lot going on that as humans, our eyes and our brains know about, but we ourselves don't actually really think about. As your muscles move in your face and contract and relax, you're actually changing how blood flows through your face. And it's something that we had to work into our assets so that when they were actually talking and emoting, there was some life to their face that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
We also studied many details like the pores of the skin, the way light scatters through skin, details like De Niro's classic mole, that characteristic feature. And each one of them, we tried to create their most realistic younger self according to every piece of information and photographic and filmic evidence we could find.
Not being required for an actor to wear all this bulky gear and things that distract really the performance, I think that means that technology is a game changer for this kind of movie.
And everybody's going to appreciate it. It's a good thing.
It becomes a matter of taking all of these different tools in our pipeline, putting them together to solve these facial performances, and then also take these solved facial performances and put them on our younger selves.
The retargeting part. Oh, damn, it's so difficult. The camera is making sense out of the pixels that it sees and the lighting and the
Okay, cool. So I'm not going to show you guys the whole thing because it is quite long. But if you are interested and you want to see the rest of it, you can find it on Netflix YouTube channel. So, and Netflix is the one who developed all this technology to make the movie. If you guys have seen this movie, I'm interested to know if you think that it did a good job at making the actors look younger. I know that it received some criticism, or not criticism, but some people thought that maybe the technology could have been better, or the anti-aging didn't work so well. And actually, I believe a YouTuber made his own version, which some people think was arguably better, of the deepfake technology. And of course, it is still developing technology. It's not always perfect. Yeah, sometimes in these clips, you can tell that it's not completely seamless. But yeah, it's getting there, and it's definitely improving as time goes on. So yeah, that's one example of a positive use case of deepfakes. So there is also some ethics behind it, especially in some applications in the movie industry. So I want to talk a little bit about the ethics of sort of resurrecting deceased people in movies. So this actually happens quite a lot. So we talked about, for example, the example with Dali, of the deepfake of Dali for the Dali Museum in Florida. But there's also other examples in movies of deceased actors making a reappearance in movies with the use of deepfakes. So an example is in Star Wars Rogue One, the deepfakes of Peter Cushing and Carrie Fisher were used to make them appear in these movies. So, of course, in all of these cases, consent is received from the families, but sometimes this still makes people uncomfortable, the idea that people who have passed away can reappear in deepfakes. So this is one of these big questions that still exists in the industry about whether this sort of thing should be allowed. But even when there is consent from the family, sometimes people just don't like the idea of deepfakes being used in movies, of not actual people playing the roles, but a sort of artificial version of these people playing. But this is increasingly used in movies. There's a lot of use cases where this has been used. So that's a little bit about ethics on that. But I wanted to show you guys actually another video on this, because I think it really shows this principle that sometimes you don't realize how technology is going to be used until it's developed, right? And often we think about that as a bad thing, about some of the bad use cases of how deepfakes can be used. But I found this really interesting video that I want to show you guys. And I think it'll show you how technologies can often be used in so many ways that you may have not even realized would be useful. So we're going to show you guys a video of how deepfakes were used to advertise small businesses. So let me show you guys that.
Big businesses and brands that suffered during the pandemic found their way back, but the smaller stores still suffer.
This lockdown has been a real tough phase of my life. I mean, I have seen bad days, but this was the worst.
Last year we helped small businesses through Diwali, so this year we decided to bring it back. Presenting not just a Cadbury ad. This Diwali, we helped hundreds of small businesses by making India's biggest brand ambassador be their brand ambassador.
इस दिवाली आप भी ना अपने पास वाले फैशन और एम्पोरियम से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। और फिर एम्पायर फुटवेयर, नाम तो सुना होगा। अपना स्टाइलिश चश्मा बगल वाले हेवन आई ऑप्टिशियन से ही लेना। सिद्धिविनायक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स से लेटेस्ट स्मार्टफोन खरीदकर धमाकेदार सेल्फी पोस्ट करना।
क्या कर रहे हो? मीठा लाए कि नहीं?
लाए हो ना यार, अपने पास वाले रोशन किराना से। आप भी अपना मीठा वहीं से लेना।
We used machine learning to recreate Shah Rukh Khan's face and voice to take the local store names in the ads.
इस दिवाली आप भी ना अपने पास वाले चॉइस ऑफ फैशन से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। पास वाले आजकल फैशन से ही, रॉयल फैशन से ही, एनके क्लॉथ्स से ही, पास वाले लक्ष्मी कलेक्शन से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। इस दिवाली आप भी ना अपने पास।
Different versions of the same ad with local store names were targeted as per the PIN code of the viewer, showing them only the nearby stores. But it is impossible to cover all the stores. So we gave the power to the people to create their own version of not just a Cadbury ad. any small business owner could promote their stores through their own social media networks like WhatsApp forwards and other social media pages.
हमारे आसपास की जो दुकानें हैं, उनकी दिवाली भी तो मीठी होनी चाहिए।
Cadbury celebrations, not just a Cadbury ad.
Okay, cool. So I see someone in the chat has put exciting and scary at the same time. I completely agree with you. I actually think that perfectly encapsulates how people feel about AI as a whole. And I think I must agree with you, right? There is really this double-edged sword that we keep talking about in these lessons, right? I feel like every lesson comes back to this. It's very exciting. It's very cool. There's so many cool use cases, but at the same time, you see that and you think about all the ways that this could maybe be used in a bad way. And also, I think part of the reason why maybe you find it scary, but I'd love to know your thoughts, is that there's sort of an uneasiness of this idea that that it's not really real, you know, that wasn't actually said and that it was manipulated, even though it's for a good cause, right? To be said in that way. But yeah, so I wanted to show you guys that because sometimes people don't realize that often deepfakes are quite widely used. The last thing that I wanted to end with, and my favorite thing, I'm very glad we had time for this, is my favorite deepfake I've ever seen. And it was made by a lab at MIT, and it's called An Event of Moon Disaster. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It did go quite viral on YouTube. And what it is a deepfake of a Nixon speech that was never delivered. So when the first people went to the moon in 1969, obviously there was a lot of fear that something bad could happen, that maybe they would be stranded on the moon, that they wouldn't be able to make it back. And because of that, a speech was prepared for Nixon, who was the president at the time, to deliver in case that something had happened and that the men on the moon had gotten stranded there. So this speech was prepared, never delivered. And so what these people at MIT did to sort of showcase what AI can do and what deepfake technology can do is that they recreated this speech with Nixon, his voice and his face, with the actual speech so that everyone can see it. And it's a very well-written speech. It's really beautiful. It's quite moving. So I'm going to show you guys that now. And we're going to close with that so that you guys can, have a look at this amazing deepfake. And I'm also interested to see how realistic you think it is. So have a look at the face, the eyebrows, the blinking, and tell me if you guys are fooled or not, even though you know that it's a deepfake. So it's kind of cheating. But yeah, let me know what you think at the end.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. These two men are laying down their lives in mankind's most noble goal, to search for truth and understanding. They will be mourned by their families and friends. They will be mourned by their nation. They will be mourned by the people of the world. They will be mourned by a Mother Earth that dared send two of her sons into the unknown. In their exploration, they stirred the people of the world to feel as one. In their sacrifice, they bind more tightly the brotherhood of man. In ancient days, men looked at stars and saw their heroes in the constellations. In modern times, we do much the same, but our heroes are epic men of flesh and blood. Others will follow and surely find their way home. Man's search will not be denied. But these men were the first, and they will remain the foremost in our hearts. For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, someone's saying that the blinking maybe looks a bit unnatural. Yeah, I agree. I would say that I think if you didn't know it was a deepfake, or at least I think, me personally, if I'd just seen that video, I wouldn't have necessarily, I mean, obviously from the context, you can tell that that didn't actually happen. But apart from that, just looking at it, I don't think it's very clear. Or I think, yeah, you have to look quite carefully and look for the signs of sort of the blinking and all of that to realize that it is a deep fake. I think also maybe a bit the lip syncing always isn't perfect, I would say, is the other thing that gives it away, because it's, you know, it's based on other speeches, so the lips aren't always perfectly synced to the voice. That's something else that maybe gives it away a little bit. But I think it's really interesting, and it's cool that it's sort of bringing back a, you know, a part of history that maybe we didn't know about, and we didn't know about this speech. So this is an example of a positive use case of deepfakes. So yeah, I wanted to end on that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this lesson and enjoyed seeing some of the positives and negatives that deepfake can bring. We have some time for tech questions now. If anyone has any questions they want to ask about deepfakes, whether that's about positives, negatives, I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the matter. What did you guys think about the clips we watched or the content we covered? Yeah, I'd love to know what you think about deepfakes in general. Do you think it's positive or negative? Yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'll stick around for a little bit. And otherwise, yeah, we're done for today, and we have one last session next week, and then that'll be the end of our 8-week sessions on AI for beginners. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying the content so far. I don't see any questions yet. Yeah, cool. Doesn't look like anyone has any questions. Okay, perfect. Right, then I'll see you guys next week. Hope you guys have a lovely week. And yeah,